going to have. So that leads me into my next topic, Bo. And this is something I think is very interesting. You can make an argument for both sides, but I've picked my side and I want to see what side you are on. Which side of the ball has more pressure to perform, offense or defense? Now, there's a couple of ways you can go here. I'm gonna make my case first, and I'm interested to see which side you're on. I think it's the offense. Why? One, your head coach is offensive minded. He is a great offensive mind. He is what people are calling an offensive guru. He's drawing the plays. He's calling the plays. With that being said, all the guys they've drafted on the offensive side of the ball, obviously the past 3 picks they've used on skill position players. Bijan Robinson this year, Drake London in 2021, Kyle Pitts in 2020. So that's a lot of draft capital you have invested on the offensive side of the ball. The other thing about it is, too, obviously, just the amount of pressure Desmond Ridder has on him to perform this year. I mean, that could honestly seal it alone. But the amount of there is also questions about Kyle Pitts. Now, I don't think there should be any worries about Kyle Pitts, but there have been questions about Kyle Pitts. Is he going to be able to have a bounce back year coming off the injury? Is he going to be able to, have more of a season like his rookie season, maybe with more touchdowns than he was last year? Now, and last year he was hurt, so you have to give him a little bit of a pass there. But those rumblings have been out there, So I think there's a lot more pressure on the offense, and other thing about it too, with investing the draft stock that you have in the offensive side of the football, we talked about this before a while back ago. They did spend a lot of money on the defensive side of the ball. Yes, you got it. You spend a lot of money when you talk about free agent dollars. You did invest a lot on the defensive side of the ball in free agency. Yes, and I'm not saying they missed by any stretch to me. So let me be clear. I'm not saying they missed on anybody offensively, but it's important to make sure you're hitting on draft picks. We know how you can get set back if you miss on draft picks and first round picks to especially to that point. So, I mean, just to give you an example, we've struggled as a pass rushing team because we've just straight up missed on some pass rushers, and not this regime. I'm not putting on this regime. The last regime, they drafted Takk McKinley. Where is he now? He's not on the roster. Vic Beasley. He did have a good season. He did have one good season. And, his contract year wasn't terrible, but where is he now? He's not on the roster. And if you ask Falcons fans, they probably call Takk McKinley a miss. They probably call Vic Beasley a miss. So we know how important it is if you miss on guys. So you can't afford to have any of the guys. And again, I'm not saying that they did miss on any of these guys because obviously they have their whole careers ahead of them. But you can't afford to miss on high draft picks, obviously. You can't afford to miss really on any first-round draft picks, period. So without all those reasons being said, I think there is more pressure on the offensive side of the football to perform this year.
Well, I would say I could go either way. I would agree with you that when you have 3 first-round draft picks in 3 consecutive years under this new regime, then there is pressure to score points. Problem is the offense was one of the best rushing. It was the top 3, maybe the second best rushing offense in the league last year,
right?
And they only look to get better. They faced more stacked boxes than any other offense in the league last year and produced better than any other team in the league last year.
Correct.
So it's easy to say there, but I would go ahead and look at the fact that all the positional spending other than Jonnu Smith from this roster and re-signing, the guys that you needed, like extending Chris Lindstrom and re-signing Caleb McGarry, which is keeping your own, but all the guys you brought in from David Onyemata and Calais Campbell and Kendall Ellis and
Jesse Bates,
and and Mike Hughes. You know, you can go a Jesse Bates, who was the biggest, highest price free agent, and then you brought in a new DC and Ryan Nielsen. You know, those were all your money from outside was spent because the Johnny Smith was a trade, but all the money on the outside that
spent on defense.
That came to the defense. So you spent a lot of free cap space on defense. You went out and got the best secondary player available on defense in Jesse Bates. You improved this defense at every level, seemingly. And you did it based on a guy in Ryan Nielsen and what he wants to do with the defense and where it differs from Dean Pease. So we can talk about the cheaper players with draft capital spent, but price tag wise, that's fine. We've seen the offense perform with lesser talent because of the coach. So I would have to. I'm not saying I disagree with you about the offense because I think when you spend draft capital like that with players like Jalen Carter on the board, then you've got to perform. But on the other side, they signed they tied up a lot of money in what are supposed to be impact players. So defense is the one that's got to improve. You lost games last year, not because you couldn't control the football because you could, or score points because you did, not as great as you wanted to, but you shortened games with how you played because your defense was flawed. And you need the defense to be better to open the offense up, to use Bijan Robinson at what his best skill set, to use Drake London and Kyle Pitts. You know, Desmond Ritter's not going to get a chance to do the things that people want to see from him if this defense is allowing points every time, and every time they get the ball, they're shredded and they go down the field, because now you have to play a certain style of offense to cut the game shorter and try to control that to keep your defense in limited possessions because you don't trust them and they can't get after the quarterback and all those things. And I think that was an extent last year. That is something that happened based on the personnel that the defense had, or lack of personnel, lack of talent on that side, especially at times when you did not have anybody in that secondary that you honestly trusted, because A.J. Terrell and Casey Hayward are both, who's gone now, but we're both off the field. And you've got the Cornell Armstrongs, no offense.
No.
But you've got those type, the young players like Isaiah Oliver is gone, but D. Alford and Cornell Armstrong and Darren Hall are your three cornerbacks on the field because you're a nickel. So that's a situation where, we can say the offense, but honestly, the defense is under just as much pressure, including the new DC and Ryan Nielsen. So I understand the offense. I don't disagree, but I can make an argument, just as big of an argument, for the defense being under just as much pressure.
You absolutely can. And I think that's why it's such an interesting conversation. And it brings me to this question. So I talked about how hard it can be to bounce back from missing on draft picks, whether the first round draft pick, second round, whatever. If you miss in the draft, it is hard to bounce back from. And again, I touched on the Falcons have kind of gone through that themselves in certain years. But you could say the same thing for bad free agent signings. Hard to bounce back from that as well. Which one would you say it is harder to bounce back from? Is it harder to kind of work around missed draft picks, or is it harder to work around missed free agent signings?
Hell, that's a.
I mean, it's almost one and the same, but.
Well, look, it's not a. I feel like I'm coming off like smartest guy in the room, or trying to, and I'm not trying to. Let me explain something. It depends on where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
The Falcons are going to have a ton of money next year.
Yeah.
And so if they miss on a Jesse Bates or an Onyemata this year, it's okay. It all depends on the guaranteed money that is put out there. But
Right.
let me say something. When what killed the Falcons at the end of the Thomas Dimitroff era were they re-signed their own, which was the right thing to do. But when you re-sign your own and they're contributing, you're basically taking money and you're signing players long term. So your cap space is going down, especially when you have a franchise quarterback making franchise quarterback money, which
Right.
they did. So the quarterback money, that kind of really changes the game.
Right.
With a Desmond Ridder right now and the money he's making, or if they had a rookie quarterback,
Yeah.
you could miss on some free agents. But when you get a franchise quarterback and you're paying him that, now you're in a position where you can't miss on draft picks. And the reason is because you build your team through the draft and then you re-sign your own and you sprinkle in veteran players, right?
Right. Right.
So the
Supplement the rest of
Falcons
the
made
roster.
a conscious decision to build through free agency on the defense,
Right.
and to build through the draft on the offense.
Correct.
You just can't afford to be paying players top-level money and miss on the draft. So to me, the missing on the draft is what really hamstrings franchises, especially once the worm turns and
Right.
you start. Does that make sense?
Yes. It makes sense and answers the question.
So to me, the draft is the way to not only restock, but to build some key pieces.
Correct.
And you can always sprinkle in free agents, right?
Right.
But when you start winning and you get to the place that the Falcons were in the 16 and 17 seasons, to answer your question, that version of the Falcons couldn't miss on draft picks like they did with Tat McKinley.
Right.
Like they did with some offensive linemen. Everyone always says the Julio Jones trade crippled this team.
No.
It didn't.
No.
What I will tell you is, because they say, well, look at all the draft capital you traded. And that's true. You traded a lot of draft capital. What crippled the team was missing on Peter Kahns the next year and missing on Lamar Holmes the next year. And then you missed on trench players that you needed to build the core of the team, the trenches up. So the draft to me is how you build a team. I've always said you build the team through the draft and then through sprinkling in free agents while keeping your own.
Right.
When you get to a certain level, your team's already built, you're maintaining. You can't miss on draft picks because that's the way you restock players and continue to keep your team intact. You get contract-friendly players who are starters in the first, second, and third round. So I would say that to me, the draft, you don't want to overpay someone else's used goods if they're not quality. And that's what free agency is. That's why I think you saw this team go through free agency the way they did this offseason, where they didn't really only sign one guy to a really big contract, not named Chris Lindstrom, and that was an extension. But the draft, man, is very important. It's very important.
And you gave the perfect example, honestly, with the 16-17 team that, again, it had their kind of cornerstone pieces set, and they couldn't miss in the draft because they had a lot of money allocated at that point to Matt Ryan. They had a lot of money allocated at that point to Julio Jones and guys of that nature. So, like you said, at that point in where the Atlanta Falcons were, because it goes back to where you're saying it depends on where they are. Where they were at that point in time, they didn't necessarily have a lot of money to supplement the team with free agents. So it made the draft picks that much more important. And that's why like you said, it really hamstringed them when they were missing on draft picks at that point in time, because at that point in time, that was one of the most key times you couldn't be missing on draft picks. So no, that was a perfect example. But I agree. Look, you can, for where the Falcons are now, it really could go either way because it really is two sides of it. It's really a two-sided coin. You have a lot invested draft stock wise on the offensive side. And on the defensive side, you have a lot of money, a lot of free agent dollars invested on the defensive side of the football. So you, like I said, you can really make an argument for both. And I think we did a good job of doing that. And that's why I think the conversation is so interesting. But I think we won't have to worry about it either way because I think both sides will perform. And I think we are set to have a very, very fun and a very good year for the Atlanta Falcons. So that is